Well, I think a deal would, first of all, you know, Karen Knissel, she's a former Austrian foreign minister that's currently residing in St. Petersburg. She heads up what's called the Gorky Center. Um, very, very smart lady. She abhors the term deal. She calls it the language of gangsters. Well, which is why Donald Trump uses it. A deal isn't, I mean, Donald Trump wants a deal because a deal is a one-way street. Donald Trump wants everything for him, nothing for you, and he can break it anytime he wants because he'll just call it a bad deal, and I'm looking for a better deal. It's the language of gangsters, and the Iranians should understand that and not be looking for any deal. You don't deal with the mafia; they always win because that means that you've gone down to their level and you're playing their game. Iran needs to be looking for a comprehensive treaty-based agreement founded in international law, which is problematic because Donald Trump has stated that he doesn't believe in international law. Um, so right off the bat, I'd say that we just have incompatible visions on what conflict resolution looks like in Iran and in the United States. But to answer your question, a deal would be nuclear, to bring to close the nuclear file and ballistic missile that Iran would have to voluntarily disarm of the one thing that gives it viability. Um, and um, and once they did that, then Israel would come in and finish them off. I mean, that's the deal. What the United States is saying is voluntarily get rid of anything that gives you, um, you know, deterrence capability, and then Israel will finish you off because we want regime change. Israel will not be happy until the Ayatollahs are gone. And frankly speaking, the core of American policymakers share that same sentiment. You know, they shouldn't have gone over the embassy walls in 1979 because when they did that, they taught an entire nation to hate them. And that hatred's still there. It's irrational hatred. It doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't matter. You don't take Americans hostage for 444 days. You don't poke the dead bodies, the charred bodies of 8 American service members who were sent to Iran, not to invade it, but to rescue hostages that the Iranians took hostage. I mean, Iranians aren't the good guys here in terms of what happened in 1979. I know the Shah, Sabak, culpability and all that. American people don't care about that. The Iranian people need to understand that, you know, when you insult the American people, that insult stays around. We don't forgive and forget. We hold grudges, and right now there's a big grudge against Iran. There's not too many Americans out there. I'm one of the few that articulate for good relations, normalized relations with Iran. Um, Most Americans would be very happy to see the Ayatollahs go away, not because they know anything about the Ayatollahs or they know anything about how Iran functions, but because they have been programmed into linking the Ayatollahs with holding Americans hostage, taking an American embassy, a failed rescue mission, 8 dead Americans burned on the desert floor, Desert One. Um, you know, this is the reality. So, it's there should be no compromise on the part of the Iranians because the moment they compromise, the moment make a deal, it's over. You don't make a deal with the devil. You don't make a deal with the mafia, and don't make a deal with Donald Trump.
Well, given that this is an existential threat then to the Iranians, that is, even if they make a deal or not, as you say, they will. The regime change is nonetheless the key objective. How does this impact how the Russians and the Chinese would respond to an American and Israeli attack on Iran? Because, well, I heard that there was good possibility that the Russians had something to do with shutting down the Starlink during the riots. But overall, Iran is a key regional power in the wider Eurasian continent. It's a key pillar of this greater Eurasian partnership. So, and for countries like China, it's also an important source for energy. And if it was able to be knocked out, it would certainly be taken advantage of to go after Russia or China in the future. So um, it's hard to expect to be reasonable that they would allow Iran to go down in a similar way as Venezuela, for example?
I think you hit the nail on the head here. Iran's not Venezuela. Iran is much closer and much more important. It's a BRICS member. Um, Russia has a strategic relationship with Iran. There's a secret military annex that now has been ratified by both the Russians and the Iranians that's in play, and the Chinese have likewise been, working with the Iranians. I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago that many say is the reason why I got debanked. Um, basically, I basically said, give the camel a bloody nose. That you can't let the camel stick its nose under the tent, or else the camel's coming in. And the United States is the camel. It's trying to, stick its nose under the tent here, and that somebody needs to give it a bloody nose. Now, again, I'm not advocating for any harm to come to any Americans. I don't want that at all. Um, and I was more or less talking about, economic actions that can be done to hold the United States back or punish the United States for bad policy. But if I were the Russians, uh, again, the United States isn't as smart and clever as it thinks it is. The B-2 strike that was conducted gave away every American capability you can imagine. Um, when they talk about precision strikes, they're talking about penetrating Iranian airspace with B-2 bombers, with F-35s, with F-22s. That profile has been flown, has been captured, has been recorded. Every aspect of it has been assessed by Iranians and Russians and Chinese. Um, and if I were the Russians, I would say that my goal is to shoot down one or more B-2 bombers. Um, and prove once and for all that the concept of American um, supremacy, that America can't be touched, America is able to do anything it wants, is a fundamentally flawed concept. Now, if they do shoot them down, I hope the American air crews get out, are rescued by American search and rescue, and there's no prisoners of war and all that good stuff. But the point is, again, if I were advising Donald Trump, don't do this. You could be entering a trap, because the Russians aren't going to sit back idly and let you bomb Iran. Russia's not going to respond directly. They're not going to go to war for Iran, but Russia's going to do everything they can to ensure that your military adventure is a failure, a fundamental failure. Um, and this is up to and including, the Iranians have the ability to hit American shipping in a way that no other nation that has recently fought the Americans could, including the Houthi. We're talking about Oreshnik-like missiles that cannot be intercepted, that will rain death and destruction down on the platform, penetrating the deck, potentially penetrating the nuclear reactor, potentially sinking the ship with catastrophic loss of life, sinking other ships that are part of the carrier battle group. Um, the United States has become very cocky, and we've become accustomed to inflicting harm on people without having harm inflicted on us. I believe that the Russians and the Chinese are going to do everything possible to help the Iranians give the United States a bloody nose, a broken nose in this fight. And that's, again, another reason why you have to ask yourself, then why are we doing this? Why go through this motion? Because of Trump's ego. I mean, it's really comes down to that. It becomes also the control that Israel has over American foreign policy and national security policy. But I'm not saying the Iranians are perfect, and I'm not saying the Iranians can't mess it up, and I'm not saying the Iranians are going to succeed. But if I were the Russians, I'd be doing everything I could to ensure that the Iranians shoot down at least one, maybe two B-2 bombers, and the strike forces, strike package is going to be coming in. That will be a humiliation to Donald Trump that he won't be able to survive.
Well, as we speak now, I see on one of the screens there that there's an American a surveillance aircraft over the Strait of Hormuz, and there's also Iranian drones near, doing reconnaissance on the American naval assets in the region. So it does look as if both sides are preparing for for war now. But this is our last question. If we're not going to war, well, what would be an off ramp by now? Because it's very hard to step back from this massive show of force unless there's something to show for it, to show that your pressure tactics were successful, and you can come home with something. Otherwise, it looks as if war seems very certain by now.
Donald Trump is somebody who has little problem telling lies. Um, and he'll be able to, if he wants to, he can craft something about, you know, I received a phone call, assurances that Iran will behave properly. Once again, American military strength has compelled the Ayatollahs to back down, and things of that nature. That's the off ramp. We're going to, because this war has no legitimate foundation. Because normally an off ramp is an off ramp that takes us away from the issues of concern. Now here they say the issues of concern are the nuclear program and ballistic missiles, but you know Iran's not going to give those up, not in a vacuum, not anytime. Um, so it's I think Donald Trump, if he wanted to end this, could do what he did last time. Um, I made a decision to save Iranian lives. That when I was briefed on the totality of the damage that would be done by this strike, I realized that the Iranian people have suffered enough, at the hands of this regime. And I am not going to facilitate continued suffering. Thousands of Iranians would be killed if we struck. And instead, we're going to, pull back and double down on sanctions and, work to further isolate the regime. And we always will have our military here in the background ready to pounce, something like that. So because Donald Trump has no problem telling lies and manufacturing, his own reality, he can say anything he wants. And unfortunately, we have an American population that's just dumb enough to believe it.
That could be a strength now, though, wouldn't it? Because usually countries, they lock themselves, they get stuck in a rhetorical trap. I guess Trump's skills in terms of lying, getting away with it, just spewing pure BS, or just this ability to shift focus. I mean, one day you're talking about Venezuela, day two you're talking about Greenland. It is a talent, I guess, this managing the media. It could be an off ramp if one just wants to be optimistic. So. Um,
Well,
Final thoughts?
yeah, I mean, you got to take the silver lining when it's offered. Okay. There's a dark cloud over us, but look, it's sort of reflective of the state of affairs that we're confronted with today, where having a lying leader with no moral compass is a good thing, because his lies, his lack of moral compass, could actually prevent a war. So I'll take it.
Well, on that optimistic note, thank you very much for taking this time and sharing your insights.
Thanks for having me.